Biography and background. Thomas Jefferson was born on April 3, 1743, in Shadwell, a plantation in the Virginia colony, into a wealthy and influential family. His father, Peter Jefferson, was a prominent landowner, surveyor, and mapmaker, while his mother, Jane Randolph, came from an aristocratic family with English roots. As the third of 10 siblings, Jefferson received a rigorous education that reflected the high standards of Virginia's elite. From an early age, Jefferson demonstrated exceptional intelligence and a deep passion for learning. He began studying Latin, Greek, and French at a young age and received training in mathematics, history, and philosophy. When his father passed away in 1757, Jefferson inherited a significant portion of the family estate, including Monticello, which would later become his lifelong home. In 1760, Jefferson enrolled at the College of William and Mary, one of the most prestigious institutions of the time. There, he was profoundly influenced by his professors and Enlightenment thinkers, particularly Professor William Small, who introduced him to political philosophy and science. Under Small's mentorship, Jefferson studied the works of European philosophers such as John Locke, Francis Bacon, and Isaac Newton, ideas that would later shape his political beliefs. After graduating, Jefferson pursued a career in law and quickly established himself as one of Virginia's most skilled attorneys. He was known not only for his legal expertise, but also for his sharp writing and logical reasoning, qualities that soon propelled him into politics, where he became a key figure in the American Revolution. Early political career. After establishing himself as a successful lawyer in Virginia, Thomas Jefferson entered politics in the 1760s. In 1769, he joined the Virginia House of Burgesses, where he quickly gained attention for his speeches advocating colonial self-governance and opposing British interference. He was also an early voice calling for the abolition of slavery, although he later continued to own enslaved people at his Monticello estate. A turning point in Jefferson's political career came with the American Revolution, 1775 to 1783. As tensions between the 13 American colonies and the British government escalated, Jefferson became deeply involved in the independence movement. In 1775, he was selected as a delegate to the Second Continental Congress, where American leaders debated the future of the colonies. Due to his exceptional writing skills, he was tasked with drafting the Declaration of Independence, one of the most significant documents in U.S. history. Adopted on July 4, 1776, the Declaration asserted the rights of all people to freedom and equality and formally proclaimed America's independence from Britain. Its powerful words, such as all men are created equal and the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, became the foundation of American democracy. The document not only inspired the American Revolution, but also influenced democratic movements worldwide. Following independence, Jefferson continued to serve in Virginia's government. From 1779 to 1781, he was the governor of Virginia during a critical phase of the Revolutionary War. Under his leadership, Virginia faced multiple attacks from British forces, including the invasion led by General Benedict Arnold in 1781. Despite challenges in defending the state, Jefferson remained committed to legal reforms and expanding religious freedom. After his term as governor, Jefferson briefly stepped away from politics to focus on his family. However, he soon returned to public service in a key diplomatic role. In 1785, he was appointed U.S. Ambassador to France, succeeding Benjamin Franklin. During his time in France, he witnessed firsthand the social unrest that would lead to the French Revolution, further strengthening his belief in liberty and democracy. Throughout this period, Jefferson played a crucial role in shaping America's political foundations, laying the groundwork for the reforms and policies he would later implement as president. Presidency. After years of public service, Thomas Jefferson was elected as the third president of the United States in 1801, following a tense election against John Adams and Aaron Burr. He became the first president to be inaugurated in Washington, D.C., the newly established capital. Under Jefferson's leadership, the United States entered a period of territorial expansion and economic growth, though not without challenges. 1. Domestic policies. Reducing government power and financial reforms. One of Jefferson's primary goals as president was to limit the size and power of the federal government. He believed that the government should interfere as little as possible in people's lives and that central authority should be reduced. To achieve this, he implemented several key measures: cutting military spending, reducing the size of the Army and Navy to lower government expenses, lowering federal taxes, particularly the excise taxes imposed by the previous administration of John Adams, paying down the national debt, which helped stabilize the country's finances and strengthen its economy. These policies were popular among many Americans as they reduced the financial burden on citizens. However, they were also controversial, as they weakened the military at a time when the U.S. faced growing external threats. 2. The Louisiana Purchase, expanding U.S. territory. Jefferson's greatest achievement as president was the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. At the time, the Louisiana Territory was controlled by Napoleon Bonaparte, who was preparing for war in Europe and needed money to fund his campaigns. Jefferson saw an opportunity to expand U.S. territory and quickly entered negotiations with France. The deal was finalized for $15 million, effectively doubling the size of the United States overnight. This acquisition added vast lands stretching from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains, securing control over New Orleans, a critical port for American trade. The Louisiana Purchase is widely regarded as one of Jefferson's most brilliant decisions, paving the way for westward expansion. 3. The Lewis and Clark Expedition. Following the Louisiana Purchase, Jefferson wanted to explore the new territory and assess its resources. He commissioned Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to lead an expedition to map the land, study its natural resources, and establish relations with Native American tribes. The expedition, which lasted from 1804 to 1806, covered thousands of miles of unexplored wilderness. The team faced harsh weather, dangerous wildlife, and occasional conflicts with indigenous groups. Despite these challenges, they successfully gathered crucial information about the geography, plant and animal life, and potential for settlement. Their journey helped open new migration and trade routes, shaping the future of American expansion. Foreign policy and the Embargo Act. One of Jefferson's biggest foreign policy challenges was navigating the growing conflict between Britain and France. Both nations were at war and sought to prevent the U.S. from trading with their enemy. Britain, in particular, frequently kidnapped American sailors and forced them into service in the British Navy. To counter this, Jefferson passed the Embargo Act of 1807, which banned U.S. trade with foreign nations in an effort to keep America neutral and avoid entanglement in European conflicts. However, the embargo backfired, severely hurting the American economy, especially merchants and farmers who relied on international trade. The act faced intense criticism and was ultimately repealed in 1809. Hat of 5. End of presidency and legacy. Jefferson chose not to seek a third term, instead passing the presidency to his successor, James Madison, in 1809. By the time he left office, the U.S. was stronger and more expansive, with a solid foundation for future growth. While the Embargo Act was considered a failure, Jefferson's achievements, especially the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark Expedition, greatly strengthened the country's position on the world stage. His presidency laid the groundwork for westward expansion and helped define the principles of limited government that would shape American politics for years to come. Contributions and legacy. Thomas Jefferson was not only a great president, but also a thinker, scholar, and reformer whose influence shaped the history of the United States. His contributions spanned across multiple fields, including politics, education, philosophy, and architecture. Here are some of his most significant legacies in America and beyond. 1. Architect of American democracy. Jefferson played a crucial role in laying the foundation of the U.S. political system. He strongly believed in republicanism, where the government should serve the people and protect individual freedoms. Throughout his career, he championed several key principles. Limited government. He supported the idea of a small government where the federal authority should not interfere too much in citizens' lives. Individual freedoms and civil rights. He advocated for freedom of speech, press, and religion, believing that the government should protect these rights. Opposition to aristocracy and monopolies. He rejected the power of the aristocracy and sought to empower ordinary citizens. Jefferson's ideas deeply influenced American politics, and many of his views still shape the U.S. government today. Founder of the University of Virginia. One of Jefferson's most enduring contributions was the founding of the University of Virginia in 1819. He saw education as the foundation of democracy and societal progress. Unlike earlier universities, which were often tied to religious institutions, the University of Virginia was designed as a secular, independent, and open-minded center of learning. Jefferson personally designed the entire campus, including the Rotunda, which was inspired by the Pantheon in Rome. He introduced a system where students could choose their own courses, instead of following a rigid curriculum, which was groundbreaking at the time. Today, the University of Virginia is one of the most prestigious universities in the U.S., standing as a testament to Jefferson's progressive vision of education. 3. Expansion of U.S. territory. During Jefferson's presidency, the U.S. doubled in size with the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. This achievement was not only a major territorial expansion, but also set the stage for westward migration, economic growth, and natural resource exploitation. However, this expansion also intensified the debate over slavery, as new states had to decide whether to allow slavery. These conflicts deepened the divide between the North and South, ultimately contributing to the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865. Ashada Para 4. Human Rights Ideals versus the Contradiction of Slavery. Despite being the author of the famous phrase, "All men are created equal" in the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson owned over 600 enslaved people during his lifetime, one of the greatest contradictions in his legacy. Jefferson believed slavery was morally wrong, yet he depended on enslaved labor for his plantation economy. He proposed gradual emancipation plans, such as sending freed slaves back to Africa or creating separate settlements for them, but these ideas never materialized. While Jefferson's contributions to democracy were monumental, his continued ownership of enslaved people remains a controversial aspect of his legacy. Another highly debated topic is his relationship with Sally Hemings, an enslaved woman at his Monticello estate. Historical evidence strongly suggests that Jefferson fathered children with her, although he never publicly acknowledged them. This complex aspect of his life continues to shape how Americans view him today. 5. Contributions to architecture and science. Jefferson was not just a politician. He was also a brilliant architect. He designed and built Monticello, which is considered one of the most beautiful architectural landmarks of its time. The estate blended European neoclassical styles with American innovations and is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Beyond architecture, Jefferson was passionate about science, astronomy, and inventions. He designed various scientific tools and improved agricultural equipment. He advocated for the metric system, though the U.S. ultimately did not adopt it. He was one of the largest book collectors of his era, and his personal library became the foundation for the Library of Congress. 6. Lasting influence. After leaving office, Jefferson spent most of his time at Monticello, writing and teaching. He passed away in 1826, exactly 50 years after the Declaration of Independence was adopted, on the same day as his longtime rival John Adams. Today, Jefferson is considered one of the greatest U.S. presidents, though his legacy remains complex due to the contradictions between his democratic ideals and his personal participation in slavery. His ideas about human rights, religious freedom, and territorial expansion continue to shape American politics and society. Surrounding Thomas Jefferson. Although Thomas Jefferson is considered one of the greatest U.S. presidents, his legacy is far from simple or entirely positive. He was a brilliant leader, a champion of democracy and individual liberty, but also a slave owner, and a politician whose decisions sparked significant debate. The contradictions in his character have fueled discussions for centuries. Here are some of the most controversial aspects of Jefferson's legacy. 1. Slavery and racial contradictions. One of the biggest criticisms against Jefferson is the contradiction between his ideals of freedom and his personal participation in slavery. Throughout his life, Jefferson owned more than 600 enslaved people at his Monticello estate, where most of the labor was performed by them. Jefferson famously wrote in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, yet he did not apply this principle to Black people. He proposed gradual emancipation plans, but he never freed all of his enslaved workers. Although he criticized slavery in some writings, he continued to depend on enslaved labor to sustain his plantation. One of the most debated aspects of Jefferson's life is his relationship with Sally Hemings, an enslaved woman of mixed race. DNA evidence in the late 20th century strongly suggested that Jefferson fathered at least 6 children with Hemings. However, he never publicly acknowledged this relationship. In the 21st century, Jefferson's association with slavery has led to a reassessment of his legacy, with many institutions reconsidering how they honor him. 2. The Embargo Act of 1807, a major economic mistake. One of Jefferson's most controversial decisions as president was the Embargo Act of 1807. The law banned all U.S. trade with foreign nations, aiming to keep America out of the ongoing conflict between Britain and France. However, instead of pressuring European powers, the embargo devastated the U.S. economy. Merchants, especially in New England, strongly opposed the law as they lost their main source of income. The government was eventually forced to repeal the embargo in 1809, just months before Jefferson left office. Many historians consider the Embargo Act one of Jefferson's greatest policy failures, even though his original intent was to protect the U.S. from war. Chapter 3. Views on Voting Rights and Democracy. Jefferson was a strong advocate of democracy, but his views on voting rights were far from equal by modern standards. He believed that only white men who owned property should have the right to vote, arguing that they had the intelligence and responsibility to make political decisions. He did not support voting rights for women, Black people, or landless individuals. While he helped expand democracy compared to the colonial era, his exclusionary views are now seen as outdated and restrictive. Although Jefferson's ideas laid the foundation for future democratic reforms, his own views on political equality were limited. 4. Policies toward Native Americans. Jefferson wrote about respecting Native American rights, but in practice, his policies paved the way for the displacement of indigenous peoples. After the Louisiana Purchase, Jefferson encouraged white settlers to move west, forcing many Native tribes off their lands. He promoted the assimilation of Native Americans into American society, but this often meant erasing their cultures, languages, and traditions. His policies indirectly contributed to later conflicts between Native Americans and the U.S. government. Although Jefferson did not order the forced removal of Native Americans, which happened later under Andrew Jackson, his actions set the stage for future displacements. 5. A controversial figure in the 21st century. In recent decades, Jefferson's image has been re-examined, especially in the context of racial equality movements and efforts to confront the legacy of slavery. Statues in schools. Some schools and institutions have removed his name or statues due to his history as a slave owner. Monticello's evolving narrative. Jefferson's former estate, once focused on celebrating him as a founding father, has now incorporated more information about the enslaved people who lived there. Debates on his legacy. Some Americans still see Jefferson as the architect of American democracy, while others view him as a symbol of hypocrisy. While controversial, Jefferson remains one of the most influential figures in U.S. history. Conclusion: a great but flawed leader. Thomas Jefferson was a visionary leader who shaped American democracy, yet he was also a man of contradictions and historical mistakes. He helped expand U.S. territory and strengthen democracy, but he also played a role in maintaining slavery. He championed individual freedoms, but only for certain groups. He had a progressive vision for education and science, yet some of his policies harmed minority communities. Despite the controversies, Jefferson's impact on the Declaration of Independence, U.S. institutions, and political philosophy remains undeniable. His legacy, while complex, continues to influence America today. Bản dịch này giúp người Mỹ hiểu rõ hơn về các tranh cãi xoay quanh Jefferson.